Hunger makes monsters of men, but it forces desperate ladies into unholy bargains. Colette stood trembling in the freezing rain, a single stolen loaf clutched to her chest. She had a choice: freeze in the merciless gutter or surrender her life to London's most despised, ruined nobleman. She chose the monster. Bitter winds howled through the narrow cobblestone alleys of Covent Garden, carrying with them the stench of rotting cabbage and damp coal smoke. Colette Ramirez pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her frail shoulders, her breath forming ghostly plumes in the freezing night air. It had been 4 days since she last tasted anything more substantial than dirty snow and a discarded apple core. The hollow ache in her stomach had long passed the point of sharp pain, settling into a dull, dizzying numbness that threatened to pull her under. Born into the respectable if modest Ramirez family, Colette's life had been utterly dismantled by the sudden death of her father, a minor merchant who had trusted the wrong investors. Upon his passing, the ruthless Lord Reginald Fitzroy, a man whose wealth was only matched by his sadistic appetite for breaking the vulnerable, had immediately called in debts her father never truly owed. When Colette refused Fitzroy's lecherous offer to become his mistress in exchange for debt forgiveness, her own aunt, Agatha Cromwell, had locked her out of her childhood home into the brutal winter of 1888. Agatha, hoping to curry favour with Fitzroy, had left her niece to the mercy of the unforgiving London streets. Now Colette was nothing but a ghost, haunting the edges of a society that had violently rejected her. As she huddled beneath the awning of a closed butcher's shop, her clouded eyes locked onto a discarded piece of bread near the gutters. Just as she lunged for it, a heavy velvet-clad boot stepped squarely onto the crust, crushing it into the muck. Colette looked up, her vision swimming. Towering above her was a man wrapped in a dark, weather-beaten greatcoat. His face was shadowed by the brim of a battered top hat, but she could see the sharp, aristocratic cut of his jaw and the cold, piercing silver of his eyes. This was Alec Porter, the Baron of Ashbourne. Even in the gutter, Colette knew the name. Society papers and gossiping maids alike spoke of the ruined Baron. 5 years ago, Alec had been at the pinnacle of high society until a scandalous gamble, rumours of treasonous dealings with foreign smugglers, and a devastating fire had stripped him of his wealth, his reputation, and his standing. He was a pariah, a man who supposedly lived in the decaying ruins of his ancestral manor on the outskirts of the city, drowning in debt and madness. "You are starving, little bird," Alec said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated over the roar of the wind. It held no pity, only a stark clinical observation. "I am surviving," Colette croaked, her voice failing as a shiver violently racked her spine. Alec knelt, uncaring that the freezing mud soaked into his once fine trousers. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather-bound flask and a pristine wrapped parcel of roasted meats and fresh cheese. The aroma hit Colette like a physical blow. She whimpered, her dignity completely shattered by the primal demand of her starved body. "Eat," he commanded, gently placing the parcel in her trembling hands. She tore into the food with animalistic desperation, choking on the rich cheese before washing it down with a burning gulp of brandy from his flask. Alec watched her in silence, his expression unreadable. When she finally slowed, gasping for breath, he spoke again. "Your name is Colette Ramirez. You are the daughter of the late Charles Ramirez, currently hunted by Reginald Fitzroy for debts manufactured by a corrupt solicitor." Colette froze the bread, turning to ash in her mouth. "How do you know that—" "I know many things that happen in the shadows of this city," Alec replied, standing up. "I also know that by tomorrow evening, Fitzroy's men will find you. They will drag you to the workhouse, or worse, directly to his bedchamber. Your aunt has already signed the papers declaring you a wayward vagrant. You have no legal standing, no money, and no hope. Tears, hot and humiliated, spilled over Colette's dirt-streaked cheeks. "If you have come to mock me, my lord, you have succeeded. Leave me to die in peace." "I have not come to mock you. I have come to offer you a transaction," Alec said, extending a gloved hand. "I require a wife. Immediately, by the archaic stipulations of my late grandfather's will, if I am not wed by my 30th birthday, which strikes at midnight tomorrow, I forfeit the last remaining acres of Ashbourne Manor to the Crown. I offer you my name, my protection, and a permanent escape from the hunger that is currently killing you. In return, you ask no questions about my affairs, you demand no affection, and you act as my loyal baroness in the eyes of the law." Colette stared at his outstretched hand. Marriage to the ruined baron. It was social suicide, but society had already murdered her. The choice was between dying a frozen beggar being violated by Fitzroy, or marrying a fallen aristocrat who at least possessed the decency to feed her. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you have nothing left to lose," Alec replied smoothly. "And neither do I." Driven by the primitive gnawing will to survive, Colette placed her small, freezing hand into his. "I accept." They were married the following morning in a desolate, draughty chapel in Spitalfields. The vicar, a nervous man who clearly feared the Baron, rushed through the vows. Colette wore a simple, borrowed grey dress provided by Alec's gruff but efficient carriage driver, a man named Bates. There were no flowers, no music, and no warmth, just the scratch of a pen on the registry binding Colette Ramirez to Alec Porter. As they stepped out of the chapel, the carriage door swung open. Colette looked back at the foggy London skyline, knowing she had just sold her soul to escape her hunger. She had no idea how complicated her bargain was about to become. Ashbourne Manor loomed out of the dreary twilight, like the skeletal remains of a forgotten beast. Its stone facade was choked with dead ivy, and several windows in the west wing were boarded up remnants of the fire that had supposedly sealed Alec's ruin. Yet as Bates pushed open the heavy oak doors, Colette was met not with the expected stench of rot, but with the distinct scent of beeswax old paper and burning cedar. The foyer was dimly lit by a solitary chandelier, but it was immaculately clean. An elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, awaited them with a hot basin of water and a warm towel. "Welcome home, my lady." Mrs. Higgins said, her eyes kind but sharp. "Thank you," Colette murmured, bewildered. This was not the chaotic lair of a madman. It was austere, stripped of all its fine art and tapestries, but it was a functioning home. Alec removed his greatcoat, revealing a perfectly tailored, though slightly dated, dark suit. "Mrs. Higgins will show you to your chambers. There is hot water, clean clothing, and a warm meal waiting. We will dine together at 8. Do not be late." Without another word, he vanished down a dark corridor. For the first 2 weeks, Colette lived in a state of surreal apprehension. Her chambers were modest but warm, a stark contrast to the freezing streets. She ate heartily, the colour slowly returning to her hollow cheeks, her dull hair regaining its natural rich chestnut lustre. Yet her husband was a phantom. They shared silent dinners where Alec would inquire politely about her comfort, but dodge any questions regarding his own life. It was during the 3rd week that the cracks in Alec's facade began to show. Colette, suffering from a bout of insomnia, had wandered down to the library in search of a book. The manor was deathly quiet, save for the howling wind. As she approached the heavy mahogany doors of the library, she noticed a sliver of light spilling onto the floorboards. She hesitated, hearing the low, urgent murmur of voices. "The shipments from the East India docks have been secured, Your Grace," a voice said. It was an educated, refined voice, not the rough tone of a smuggler. And the Chancellor's man, that was Alec. His voice held a commanding, terrifying authority, that Colette had never heard before. "Paid off as you instructed. The Bank of England suspects nothing of the diverted funds. But Lord Salisbury is growing anxious. He requests a meeting." Colette clamped a hand over her mouth. "Your Grace. The Bank of England. Lord Salisbury." "Let Salisbury sweat," Alec replied coldly. "I will not reveal my hand until Fitzroy and his syndicate are fully exposed. They thought ruining the Baron of Ashbourne would blind me. They do not realize I am watching their every move from the dark." Unable to control her trembling, Colette took a step back, but her foot found a loose floorboard. It creaked loudly in the silent hall. The voices instantly ceased. The library door swung open with a violent rush of air, and Alec stood there, his eyes practically glowing with lethal intent. When he saw Colette, his expression flickered from predatory rage to a guarded, icy calm. He dismissed the man inside, a distinguished-looking gentleman in a high-collared suit who bowed deeply to Alec before slipping out a side door and turned his attention back to his wife. "You are wandering late, Colette," Alec said, stepping into the hall and closing the door behind him. I was looking for a book." She stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Alec, who was that? Why did he call you Your Grace?" Alec closed the distance between them. He reached out his warm, bare hand, gently lifting her chin. The touch sent an unexpected shockwave through her body. "You promised to ask no questions, my starving Rose. Curiosity is a dangerous vice in this city." "You are not ruined, are you?" she breathed, searching his silver eyes. He offered a cynical half-smile. "Ruined is a matter of perspective. Go back to sleep, Colette, and forget what you heard." But Colette could not forget. In the days that followed, she began to observe the manor with a keener eye. She noticed the discreet, heavily armed guards patrolling the perimeter at night. She noticed the fine, unmarked carriages that arrived at ungodly hours. And one afternoon, while cleaning a dusty bookshelf, she found a heavy gold signet ring tucked behind a volume of Shakespeare. It did not bear the simple crest of a baron. It bore the intricate, undeniable coat of arms of a duke. Before she could piece the puzzle together, the outside world violently crashed into their secluded sanctuary. It happened on a bleak Tuesday afternoon. Colette was in the drawing room when the front doors were thrown open with a deafening crash. Heavy boots echoed in the foyer, followed by Mrs. Higgins's outraged shouts. Colette rushed into the hall, freezing in her tracks. Standing there, flanked by 3 brutish thugs, was Lord Reginald Fitzroy. He was a corpulent, sneering man, dressed in the height of fashion, a stark contrast to the decaying manor he had just invaded. "Well, well," Fitzroy purred, his greasy eyes raking over Colette's newly restored figure. "The little runaway pendulum. I must say, Colette, you look remarkably well for a woman married to a lunatic." "Get out of my home," Colette demanded, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "Your home?" Fitzroy laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "This pile of rubble belongs to the bank, my dear. Or rather, it belongs to me, since I purchased the Porter debts yesterday morning. Your husband is a fraud and a beggar. I have come to collect what is mine, the estate and you." "You are mistaken, Lord Fitzroy." A cold, deadly voice echoed from the top of the grand staircase. Alec descended the stairs slowly. He was no longer wearing the dated suits of a ruined baron. He was dressed in immaculate modern evening wear, a dark silk cravat at his throat. He moved not with the weary shuffle of a defeated man, but with the lethal grace of an apex predator. Porter. Fitzroy sneered, though Colette noticed the slight waver in the man's bravado. "Have you come to beg for more time? I'm afraid your time is up. Give me the girl, and I might let you keep the stables to sleep in." Alec stopped at the bottom of the stairs, positioning himself firmly between Colette and Fitzroy's men. "You have trespassed in my home, Fitzroy. You have threatened my wife, and you have grossly miscalculated your position. I hold your promissory notes. Fitzroy spat, waving a sheaf of papers. "You hold forgeries designed to expose your illegal money-lending ring," Alec corrected his voice, dropping to a terrifying quiet register. "Did you truly believe you ruined me 5 years ago? Reginald, did you think burning a wing of my manor and bribing the press was enough to break me? I allowed you to believe it. I stepped into the shadows so I could see exactly who was poisoning London." Alec snapped his fingers. From the shadows of the adjoining corridors, 6 men stepped out, rifles raised and leveled directly at Fitzroy and his thugs. Fitzroy's face drained of all color. "What? What is the meaning of this? You are a penniless baron." "I am Alec Porter," he said, pulling a heavy gold pocket watch from his vest. He pressed a hidden clasp, revealing the intricate ducal crest. "Duke of Kensington. And as of an hour ago, I am the owner of every property business and debt you possess, Fitzroy. You are the one who is ruined." Colette gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The secret Duke of London, the whispered phantom who controlled the city's underworld and elite circles alike. He wasn't a myth. He was her husband. Silence descended upon the drawing room, so absolute that Colette could hear the frantic, irregular hammering of Reginald Fitzroy's heart. The corpulent man stared at the heavy gold pocket watch in Alec's hand, his sneer dissolving into a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The intricate crest of the Duke of Kensington caught the dim light practically blinding in its authority. Fitzroy stumbled backward, his polished boots slipping on the worn carpet. "This is a bluff. The Duke of Kensington has not been seen in London society for a decade. You are a beggar playing dress-up. Porter. A beggar who just bought the debt on your Mayfair townhouse, your merchant vessels in the East India docks, and the very clothes upon your back." Alec replied, his voice a lethal, silken whisper. Before Fitzroy could issue another desperate threat, the heavy front doors of Ashbourne Manor opened once more. The biting wind swept in, carrying with it a detachment of uniformed officers. At their head strode a stocky, stern-faced man with a thick moustache and an air of absolute authority. It was none other than Chief Inspector Frederick Abberline of Scotland Yard, a man deeply respected and feared across the city, currently tasked with untangling London's most heinous underworld crimes. "Lord Fitzroy." Inspector Abberline barked, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "You are hereby under arrest by order of the Crown." Fitzroy whipped around, his jaw slack. "Abberline, on what charges? I am a peer of the realm. You cannot simply storm into—" "I have a warrant, signed directly by Prime Minister Lord Salisbury," Abberline interrupted, coldly producing a rolled parchment. "The charges are extensive. Forgery, grand extortion, operating illegal gambling syndicates, and high treason against Her Majesty Queen Victoria through the smuggling of stolen military armaments. Your forged promissory notes, including the ones you hold in your hand regarding the late Charles Ramirez, have already been seized as evidence." Colette gasped, looking from the stoic inspector to her husband. Alec had not merely plotted to save his own estate. He had orchestrated a masterstroke to dismantle an entire criminal empire. "Take him," Alec commanded. Fitzroy's thugs immediately dropped their weapons, raising their hands in surrender to Abberline's constables. Fitzroy himself began to thrash and scream, his aristocratic veneer shattering completely as the heavy iron handcuffs snapped around his wrists. "You set me up, Porter. You ruined your own name just to drag me down. I sacrificed a title I did not care for to excise a cancer from my city," Alec stated, stepping closer to the struggling man. "You built your fortune on the starved corpses of innocent men, like Colette's father. Now you will rot in the dark. Take him to Newgate." As the constables dragged the screaming lord out into the freezing night, Abberline tipped his hat respectfully to Alec. "Brilliant work, Your Grace. The Prime Minister sends his regards. The syndicate is entirely dismantled." "Thank you, Inspector," Alec replied softly. When the doors finally clicked shut, leaving only the crackle of the hearth fire, Alec turned to Colette. The icy predator vanished, replaced by a man looking suddenly vulnerable. He slowly approached her, his silver eyes searching her stunned face. "Alec," Colette breathed, taking a step back. You lied to me. The grandfather's will, the desperate Baron. The will was real, but it only pertained to a small, unentailed tract of land." Alec confessed, his voice dropping to a gentle rasp. "But the rest? Yes, it was a fabrication. 5 years ago, I realized Fitzroy was too powerful, too deeply embedded in Parliament to be taken down by conventional means. I had to become a ghost. I had to appear weak so he would become arrogant. The fire, the scandals, I engineered them all. And me?" Colette asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you marry a starving girl from the gutter?" Alec reached out, his warm fingers grazing her cheek. "Because I knew what Fitzroy had done to your father. I watched Fitzroy corner you, and I knew that if I didn't intervene, he would destroy you, just as he destroyed Charles. I needed a wife to complete the illusion of my desperate poverty, yes. But I chose you, Colette, because I swore I would protect the one victim of Fitzroy's cruelty that I could actually save." Tears spilled over Colette's lashes. She was no longer a pawn in a cruel game. She had been the final piece in a grand, dangerous mechanism of justice. "I am sorry I deceived you," Alec whispered, his forehead coming to rest gently against hers. "But you are no longer a ruined merchant's daughter, Colette. You are the Duchess of Kensington, and no one will ever let you go hungry again." Karma, Colette soon learned, was not merely a spiritual concept. In Victorian London, it was a brutal physical force. 3 days after Fitzroy's arrest, the scandal broke across the city like a thunderclap. The society papers, the London Gazette, and the Times all ran explosive headlines detailing the dramatic return of the Duke of Kensington and the horrific crimes of Lord Reginald Fitzroy. But the justice didn't stop at Fitzroy. The net of Alec's meticulous investigation had been cast wide, and it caught the smaller fish who had fed off the shark's scraps. One of those fish was Colette's aunt, Agatha Cromwell. Agatha had heavily invested her stolen wealth into Fitzroy's illegal smuggling rings. When the Crown seized Fitzroy's assets, the bank immediately froze Agatha's accounts. The very solicitor who had helped forge Charles Ramirez's debts turned Queen's evidence to save his own neck, fully implicating Agatha in the conspiracy to steal Colette's inheritance. A week later, Colette sat in the grand parlour of Kensington House, Alec's true magnificent residence in the heart of Mayfair, blazing with light warmth and opulence. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, sipping Earl Grey tea, when Bates, the loyal driver turned head butler, entered the room. "Your Grace," Bates murmured, bowing deeply. "There is a woman at the servants' entrance. She is demanding to see you. A Mrs. Agatha Cromwell." Colette's hand paused in mid-air. She set her teacup down her face, impassive. "Bring her to the tradesmen's hall, Bates. I will see her there." When Colette descended into the cold, stone-floored hall, she barely recognized her aunt. Agatha's expensive furs were gone, replaced by a drab-soiled wool coat. Her hair was disheveled, her face gaunt with panic. When she saw Colette radiant, healthy, and draped in the jewels of a duchess, Agatha collapsed to her knees, weeping hysterically. "Colette, oh, my sweet dear niece," Agatha wailed, reaching out with grasping hands. "You must help me. The bailiffs have thrown me out. They took the house, the silver, everything. I have nowhere to go. You must ask your husband to show mercy." Colette stared down at the woman who had locked her out in the freezing rain to starve. She remembered the gnawing agony in her stomach, the dizzying desperation, the absolute certainty of death. "Mercy, Aunt Agatha." Colette's voice was calm, devoid of any anger or malice. It was the chilling indifference of a woman who had survived the abyss. "Did you show me mercy when you barred the door as I begged for a single crust of bread? Did you show mercy when you plotted to sell me to a monster to secure your own comfort?" I was desperate, Fitzroy threatened me. Agatha lied, her eyes darting wildly. "You were greedy," Colette corrected simply. "My husband does not govern the Crown's laws, Aunt. The magistrates have decided your fate. They are sending me to the St. Giles workhouse," Agatha shrieked, clawing at her own face. "I will die there, the typhus, the cold. Colette, please, I am your blood." "My blood died with my father," Colette said, turning her back on the pathetic woman. "Bates have Mrs. Cromwell escorted off the premises. Give her a loaf of bread for her journey. I would not wish starvation on my worst enemy, but I will not shield her from the consequences of her own malice." As Agatha's desperate screams faded into the London fog, Colette felt a profound, heavy weight lift from her chest. The scales of reality had balanced perfectly. The karma that struck Fitzroy was even more severe, cementing the narrative into the dark annals of real-life history. During his confinement in Newgate Prison, awaiting trial for treason, Fitzroy contracted a severe strain of cholera that was sweeping through the damp, overcrowded cells. A man who had dined on caviar and champagne while the poor starved died in agonizing squalor, coughing up blood on a stone floor before he ever saw a judge. It was a poetic, brutal end that even Alec could not have orchestrated. With the shadows of their past utterly eradicated, Colette and Alec began to build a true life together. The marriage that had begun as a cold transaction in the freezing mud evolved into a fiercely passionate partnership. Alec, having spent 5 years locked in darkness and vengeance, found a radiant healing light in Colette's resilient spirit. Colette, in turn, discovered that beneath the Duke's terrifying, calculated exterior beat the heart of a deeply honourable, fiercely protective man. She did not merely play the role of the Duchess. She wielded her new power with purpose. Having known true life-threatening hunger, Colette convinced Alec to establish a network of heavily funded charitable kitchens and women's shelters across the East End. They aggressively bought up slum housing, tearing down the rotting tenements and replacing them with clean, affordable lodgings for the working class. The secret Duke and his starving Rose became legends not of scandalous gossip, but of unprecedented philanthropy. One winter evening, exactly a year after their hasty freezing wedding, Colette stood in the library of Kensington House, looking out at the snow falling gently over the Mayfair streets. The fire roared in the hearth, casting a golden glow over the room. Alec stepped up behind her, wrapping his strong arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, pressing a soft kiss to the curve of her neck. "What occupies your mind, my Duchess?" He murmured, his deep voice sending a familiar, thrilling shiver down her spine. "I was just thinking about a piece of ruined bread in the gutter." Colette smiled softly, leaning into his warmth. "And the monster who stepped on it?" Alec chuckled, a low, rich sound that rumbled against her back. "I was no monster, Colette. I was simply a man looking for an excuse to pull an angel out of the dirt." He turned her in his arms, his silver eyes completely devoid of the coldness they had once held. They were filled only with absolute adoration. As his lips captured hers in a deep, consuming kiss, Colette knew that her hunger had finally permanently been satiated. Did the brutal karma of Victorian London satisfy your craving for justice? Colette's journey from a starving outcast to a powerful duchess proves that the darkest nights often precede the brightest dawns. If you loved this dramatic tale of revenge secrets and true romance, please hit the like button, share this story with your fellow history lovers, and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling historical sagas. Leave a comment below would you have forgiven Aunt Agatha?